The Talmud in Sanhedrin, page 42, brings a very special bracha which we make once a month. And Rabbi says, "Helkach nimrinu me'omed." We are actually going to greet the Shechina at the time we make the Birkat Halevana. When we see the coming of the new moon, we see the appearance of the new moon, we got a bracha which we make, Asher be'ma'amaro barash hakim. All the Talmud writes is, Haro'eh levana b'chidusha. You see a moon at its beginning, when it's new. It doesn't give us the earliest time when a person should be able to make the bracha of Birkat Halevana. The Rambam writes, already from the first day onwards, when you see the moon appearing, you can already make a blessing of Asher be'ma'amaro barash hakim. Rabbi Yonah seems to hold, you should wait at least 3 days. He bases it on Masechet Sofrim, that you should wait at least 3 days when it's already given enough light that you can benefit from that light. Not that you have to benefit, but you're able to. So it gives it up to 3 days. You should try and make the bracha after that. Strangely enough, Rabbi Yosef Karo here brings a halacha which originates in the books of Kabbalah written by Rabbeinu Yosef from Chikitilia. I'll explain in a second who he was. He writes not to say Birkat Halevana before 7 full days from the Molad, from when the new moon begins. At least 7 days. And he rules like that in Shulchan Aruch. And very strangely, and the Chida points out, how could he have left the Rambam? Usually Rabbi Yosef Karo bases his halachot mainly on the Rambam, and here he totally ignored the Rambam and all the other Rishonim. He should have really ruled that either after the first day or at least 3 days, but not 7 days. So how come he followed the Kabbalistic idea of Rabbi Yosef from Chiquitila? He was a Spanish rabbi who lived in the 13th century, a very big Mekubal. The Arizal says about him that he's got the key to understanding Kabbalah. In fact, the Vilna Gaon told Rab Chaim Volozhin that his book Sharei Orah is an introduction to learning of the book of the Zohar. He cannot understand fully the Zohar without learning his writings. He was a very great big Mekubal, approximately 750 years ago. And he writes, no way should you say the bracha of the Levana before 7 days into. The Chida points out that the Talmud discusses until when you can say Birkat Halevana. The Gemara says until 7 days, Rabbi Yehuda says, and Rabbi Nehardai says until 15 days. And it's strange. That means he's telling us to make the bracha on the moon 7 days into the Molad, when there is an opinion in the Gemara not to say the bracha past 7 days into the Molad. How can that be right? So the Chida says that really, after seeing the writings of this great Kabbalistic rabbi, Rabbi Yosef, he writes, had the Rambam, that's what Rabbi Yosef Karo's reckoning was, had the Rambam seen the great writings of Rabbi Yosef from Chikitila, he would see what the greatness of not making the bracha prior to the 7 days, he would also write so. The fact that the Rambam didn't have the revelation of a lot of Kabbalistic ideas, so that's why he wrote that you make it straight away, like it seems to be from the Gemara, the Talmud. Interesting that the Magid Mesharim, who was the famous Malach who learned with Rabbi Yosef Karo, and you know the famous story of Shelah Kadosh, that he got revealed to him first time on the night of Shavuot, and he kept on learning for the rest of his life with Rabbi Yosef Karo. He also warns Rabbi Yosef Karo not to do the blessing on the moon prior to 7 days after the Molad. So, the question arises, what happens if people are concerned that if they leave the Birkat Halevana for 7 days after, they might not find the right night because of clouds, rain, and they might not be able to say the bracha. So what should we do? Who should we follow? I am aware that many Achronim actually allow it, especially on countries where the weather doesn't allow, so winter. But let me tell you, Rabbi Yosef Karo lived in Spain. He lived also in countries, even in Eretz Israel, in winter, sometimes you had months where you got a lot of rain. So he didn't consider that as a reason to make it before 7 days. So therefore, we should follow the ruling of the Shulchan Aruch, and that is the opinion of the Magid Mesharim. The Rashash said, very important not to make the Birkat Halevana before 7 days. I won't go into the Kabbalistic ideas, but he says not to do that. The Ben Ish Chai brings it in his halachot, the Chesed La'alafim. Even Rabbeinu Zalman, who was in the Hasidish side of halacha, he also brings in his halachot, you should not make Birkat Halevana prior to 7 days into the Molad. We don't have to be concerned. There's enough days after 7 days. There's another week before the end time of the Birkat Halevana. Just a little insight to understanding how come it goes against Rabbi Yehuda in the Gemara, who says you shouldn't make the bracha past the 7 days. There's actually a few commentaries who disagree with that understanding, and they actually understand what Rabbi Yehuda meant. You shouldn't say the bracha until 7 days. He didn't mean he said you shouldn't make it until 7 days, not past the 7 days. That means 7 days is the earliest you should do it, 15th day is the latest. So actually there could be a great source for this Kabbalistic idea of not making Birkat Halevana. Again, one who makes Birkat Halevana prior to the 7th day, he is not taking God's name in vain. He's actually, the bracha won't be levatala. But the strong advice with the Shulchan Aruch wants us is to make it only past the 7th day, and that's what we should try and keep to. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen ve'Amen.